Pikachu, you want to hear a joke? Okay, looked like you were saying no, but I'm gonna say it anyways. How do I like my toast? Butter-free. What is going on, guys? So today we are back with another deep dive, diving deeper a little bit further into the Jungle Cup, and today we're actually going to be looking at a highly requested Pokemon that you guys have voted for. Wigglytuff kind of like booted this guy out of the way yesterday, so we're going to give him his limelight just like he deserves since you guys voted for him. Today we're looking at Manectric, who is a pure electric type Pokemon, maxing out at level 40 with 15s across the board at 2340, which is a pretty dominating CP, especially for the Ultra League. But to get into the Great League though, we can't have a 0-1 attack, 15 defense, 15 stamina at level 24 to hit that exact 1500, which does yield us our highest available stat product inside the Great League. Now, of course, from my spreadsheets and all the numbers that I've ran, Manectric actually ranks right around 123rd in bulk and 88th in stat product. And I mean, that kind of comes from his base stats here with a super dominating 215 on his attack. It super skews his bulk and his stat product to kind of be so indifferent there, but we do also have a 127 on defense and 172 on stamina. So with a ton of our stat product actually being held up in our attack here, that kind of means that we're going to be kind of glassy. And I mean, that's okay if you can kind of play around that, but you got to kind of keep that in mind if you want to run Manectric here. So moving on from our stats, let's actually go into a few of our moves here. So we do have two fast moves, Charge Beam and Snarl. So I did a lot of poking around trying to figure out which one of these two moves is actually going to end up being better. I did create a spreadsheet just to kind of give us a visual representation of how this is going to go, but for my sanity, let's actually just go over these numbers really fast here. So Charge Beam coming in at 3.66 energy per turn for 1.66 damage per turn. After stab, it does get bumped up to a 1.99. You could probably just round that up to 2. Either way, it was closer to 1.99. Then we do have Snarl here, which is 3 1/3 energy per turn for 2.66 damage per turn. We don't get a stab bonus considering we're not Dark type, but you know, there's a small little trade-off here. Do we go for the extra damage per turn? Well, after stab, do we go with the extra 2/3 of a damage per turn, or do we go with the extra third of energy per turn? And see, at first I was thinking, well, you know, Charge Beam, even though it's going to be lackluster on the damage front, it will kind of make it more of a specialist type role, and it will help in a lot of scenarios that, I mean, we could just say, oh, we're going to be a pure electric type specialist. We're going to go for the flyers. We're going to go for the bug and flying. You know, that would be pretty sweet. But then once I got deep into the numbers, it didn't turn out that way. So up here we do have our spreadsheet, and as you can see, we are going to be looking just at the meta just for this, because I mean, the meta is going to be the ones that you're probably going to come up against more frequently than anything else. So it pretty much makes it safe to say these are probably going to be the most viewed Pokemon that you'll see. Either way, so we do have our meta-relevant Pokemon here in the left column. We do have our Charge Beam and Snarl, and you can see that Snarl has a ton more green than Charge Beam does. And then if you look even closer to the right, we do have a few sections that basically just give us what is actually going on. If you do want to look at this spreadsheet, I will leave it down in the comments below just to kind of keep it separate from the PvP spreadsheet, which I did update, by the way. It now incorporates all of the stab numbers for every single move, and it also incorporates all of the new moves that came out in that update that we just had. So let's actually look here. So you can see Beedrill and Snarl. Even though it's a lose-lose situation, which you can tell from that right column there, we're not going to win the Beedrill matchup any way we slice it, but Snarl actually does perform better there, which actually dictates that it be green in that column. Breloom is kind of a similar scenario. It's still a lose-lose, but you can see that Snarl does perform better. So let's get into some more interesting ones. One that I found interesting was Fortress. Either way, if we use Snarl or if we use Charge Beam, we're still going to end up with the exact same result with Fortress, and it's going to be a win on both sides. kind of interesting. One of the matchups that it actually helps a little bit to have Charge Beam on, you can see hair across there. We actually do perform just a tad bit better with our Charge Beam, but it's still a lose-lose, so it doesn't really matter. And then you can see the other one that we actually do pretty well with up against Charge Beam is the Vespiquen matchup, but it's still a lose-lose. So it's kind of awkward. And then there's a couple more that are very similar. Masquerain, we're gonna tie either way. Knocked Out, we're gonna win either way. And Pidgeot, we're gonna win either way. And Scyther, we're gonna win either way. But then you got to look at that like Magneton matchup. You can see that with Charge Beam, we actually end up tying up against Magneton, but we straight up win if we use Snarl. So that actually ends up meaning that Snarl has the leg up on Charge Beam in only one matchup up against the entire meta. And of course, this is a 1v1 shield scenario, so kind of interesting, but I kind of see, you know, in this E column right here, there's just Snarl, 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 Snarl. It's all Snarl. So for that reason, the fact that we're gonna do so much better with Snarl means that we're actually gonna stick with that for our fast move for the rest of this video. Now it comes down to our charge moves. And pretty much the reason that everyone is talking about Manectric, or anybody that wants to see this deep dive, is because we do have a fire type move. There are very limited amounts of fire type moves in the Jungle Cup, so Flame Burst is definitely a hot commodity right now. And you can see with 55 energy for 70 damage at a 1.27, it's not the greatest fire move, but I mean, if we got a fire move, that's already a step in the right direction. We also do have Thunder for 60 energy. We get 100 damage at a 1.67. After stab, it does get bumped up to 120 for a clean 2.0 on the damage per energy ratio. Perfectly respectable move until you see that Wild Charge here comes in at 50 energy for 90 damage at a 1.8. After stab, it does get bumped up to 108 on the damage for a 2.16. So Wild Charge starts to take over in the efficiency, plus it's a little bit faster, so Wild Charge definitely for me is way better of a move than Thunder for our Manectric here. And then Flame Burst is definitely, you know, that's going to be our other charge move for the taking here, which does make an interesting setup because we do have a really powerful electric type move on a pretty attack heavy Pokemon, and then we also have a fire type move to help up against some of the other situations that we're going to be in. Plus we have a dark type fast move which ends up being neutral to a lot of the cup. Holy cow. So to start with looking into our Manectric here, we're going to start with some shield scenarios, and we're going to start with the entire cup here going up against the 0 versus 0, which is a 39.6%. Yeah, I really like to see at least a 50% there, so we're not starting off too hot. Once we get into the 2 versus 0, you can see that we do have an 80.6%, which is getting there, but a lot of the Pokemon that actually end up still beating us, even though we have complete shield advantage in that scenario, are a lot of the grass types, which is interesting, but it does make a little bit of sense considering that, you know, they're going to be doing a lot of neutral damage to us, and I mean, if they can at least just punish us with Razor Leaf, then we pretty much can't even get to Flame Burst fast enough. So kind of defeats the purpose of having Fire Burst if we can't even use it. Then moving on to our 0 versus 2, we do have a 0%. Oh, that's horrible. I hate it. I hate that it's 0%. We don't win a single matchup if we don't have any shields to defend ourselves, which is always really, really hard to see. Then in our last shield scenario, we do have the 2 versus 2, which is a 10.4%, which is, that's depressing. That is truly depressing. But what that ends up saying is that even though we do pretty bad with no shields up against the wall, we still do better as a closer rather than an opener with Manectric here. So to actually visualize some of these matchups here, we're going to go into PvPoke. We're going to set up our Manectric with Snarl, Wild Charge, Flame Burst, and then we're going to give ourselves one shield, and then we're going to go do a multi-battle up against the entire Jungle Cup. We're going to give them one shield as well. Once we hit battle, you can see we do have a 21.6, which is pretty much in line, even though it's a declining percentage. 0 versus 0 was 39.6, down to the 21.6, and then down to a 10.4 with both shields active. So, breaking our results down by type, if we start with the bug types here, you can see we do actually have 6 wins here. And the biggest one that actually ends up being a win is probably Fortress. Outside of that, we don't really, you know, clearly win any of them. Masquerade, it's a tie, and that's a decent tie, but it'd be great if it was a win. And then you can see we don't even win against Scizor. We don't win up against Scyther, Beedrill, Venomoth, Heracross, Vespiquen, you know, all of the actual meta-type Pokemon. We don't beat them. Up against the Electrics, you can see here that we do have around 8 wins. Ampharos, Flaaffy, Electivire, Chinchou, Electrode, Luxio, Magnezone, I guess is going to be the biggest one there. A tie up against Magneton, okay. And then after that, it's just kind of like, man. I mean, we don't win against Golem, Graveler, even Raichu is one of our hardest matchups. So, kind of like Magnezone is the only one that we really have like a leg up on that's going to be pretty relevant for this month. Then moving on to the grass types, you can see, yeah, that's the top of the list. I can't scroll up any further. Actually, the only win that we have is up against Cacturne with a 558. Oh, that's pretty rough. Executor there coming in as a tie, and then it's a straight loss from there. And you know, that was kind of the thing that I was hoping that Manectric would kind of be able to do, is break up some of the grass typing, possibly even some of the bug types, using Flame Burst, but unfortunately, it just loses, like, to the main typing that I thought it would be decent up against. It just auto loses. And it's not like we're doing resisted damage straight out of the gate with an electric type move. We're trying to use Snarl, which allows us to at least do neutral damage, but even then, holy cow, do we end up just eating all of these freaking grass types. Last but not least, we do have the normal typings, and we do actually have 14 wins here, and some of the wins are actually pretty decent. So we have Pidgeotto, we do have Fearow, we do have Staravia, Staraptor. Yeah, but that's about it out of the wins. And I literally have it written down here. Mostly the flyers that are in the wins are kind of the more relevant ones, but I'd kind of expect that at this point from Manectric. I mean, having access to Wild Charge is great, and the fact that it still is our fastest move should be relatively quick. It's still, like, we don't win against all of the flyers. Like, if you look here, Noctowl is actually a tie. What? So, I mean, this is kind of going to be the theme of the video. Oddly enough, Wigglytuff rounding out the very bottom there. This is going to kind of be the theme of the video, is that Manectric looks great on paper, but when it comes to talking the talk versus walking the walk, Manectric talks a lot of trash. I'm just going to say that. So now let's transition a little bit into our meta picks here. We're actually going to go over some of the meta Pokemon. And starting off with some shield scenarios here, we do have our 0 versus 0, which is a 45.5. So already looking better than we did up against the entire cup. We're going to move on to the 1 versus 0, which is actually a 68.2. Not quite as high as the one that we had previously up against the entire cup. Next, we do have the 0 versus 1, which is, again, a 0%. Last but not least, we do have the 1v1 this time, which is actually a 27.3. Which is okay. That's at least higher than the actual entire cup, but still, that 1v1 is pretty low, and unfortunately that ends up meaning that we just kind of gonna have a lot of uphill battles here. So if we go back into PvPoke, you can see here we do have our Manectric with Snarl, Wild Charge, and Flame Burst there. We do have 1 shield for us. We're gonna do a custom group this time with 1 shield for them. We're gonna do a quick fill of the Jungle Cup meta. Once we hit battle, you can see we do have that 27.3% that we just talked about. And looking at the Pokemon here, we do have wins up against Fortress. We do have a win up against Noctowl this time. Which what that means is that specifically there is a moveset that will tie up against the Manectric, but for the meta-relevant moveset, the one that PvPoke defines as the better moveset to use, we will actually do pretty good up against that one. Pidgeot, Magneton, Magnezone also showing up here in the wins, as well as Scyther rounding off our last win there. 2, 4, 6 wins. Kind of slacking there. We do have the Masquerade as a tie, which is okay. Then we do lose up against Lantern, which, you know, I figured we would do decent up against, but the bulk is just too much. Then we do have Cradily, Golem, Venomoth, Scizor, Graveler, Venusaur, Raichu, Breloom, Heracross, Vespiquen, Beedrill, Victreebel, Vigoroth, and Ivysaur rounding out the very bottom there. So, I don't know what to really think about Manectric at this point. I want to like Manectric so much. I really do, but the numbers that it's putting up in this cup are just really too low for me to really get behind. I don't think that Manectric is a safe bet to put on any team. I mean, that sounds harsh to say, but I'm trying to figure out a way that you could at least incorporate, like maybe even if you did run like a hardcore like electric build with charge beam instead of snarl, you'd have that tiny bit more energy per turn. But I mean, even then you don't really do that much better up against the more relevant Pokemon that you're gonna see in tournaments, which is saddening. It's very saddening. So that is actually gonna be it for today, guys. Thanks so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. Here, I do have what we've got coming up next, but as usual, we'll just roll with our ending footage. Well, you've made it to the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, if you do have any ideas for content, please drop them down in the comments below. I'll be happy to look at those for you guys. Of course, if you want to join my personal Discord, get to talking to some people that have a similar outlook as myself, definitely go down into the description, join that Discord there. If you want to become a Patreon, there is a link down in the description for that as well. My outlook on Patreon is I don't want to put anything behind a paywall. This is what I do. You guys get every bit of what I make, and I don't want to limit that to someone else just because they can't pay for something. I didn't think that was fair. If you want to be a Patreon, just know that you're literally doing it from the kindness of your heart, wanting to support me, and I appreciate that. You don't even understand how much. There are a couple of other options if you would like to join the community here on YouTube. It's very similar to a Twitch-like subscription where it's a dollar amount per month depending on where you live. And then that monthly fee basically gets funneled to me every month. And you do get a couple of special perks here on YouTube, like some badges and some emojis or whatever. Honestly, I think those are only for live streaming. So that may not be the way that most people want to go, but that's an option if you want to. Other than that, if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, that link is actually going to be down in the description as well. And until our next video, guys, that should be it. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out. And until our next video, I will catch you then.